kids' friends are all drinking Prime, which is like sugar energy drink. 10 years old. This is crazy.
So we are recording whenever you want to start. Just say.
Okay.
Some people ask for a heads up just so they can watch themselves, that's all.
I will wait 2 minutes yet.
That's fine.
Okay, and my recollection is we've been paying full for that.
I think so.
That's, yeah, before we,
I did send the address and the new information to her, right before we came.
okay, because based on my summary over, I was pretty sure that it was,
Yeah.
but I didn't want my remove research either.
Yeah.
There could be, but I don't know. I didn't think about that till just now. It's correct. I think we did pretty much everything.
Yeah. I'll find out. Thanks, tomorrow.
Well, what will happen is, I should have worked it for maybe, but it's actually in the shares. Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm not sure if we can find out. I think that's,
Okay, we'll call the Richmond Township Planning Commission meeting to order. At this time, I'll ask for approval of the minutes from April 29th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the last
Okay,
meeting.
Sam has moved, Ben has seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carried. Audience participation, there is no, right? So, old business, anybody have old business? Any concerns? Okay, we'll go on to new business, Northeast Products. Somebody's got to do some enlightening.
Okay, you guys got plans? I got a couple extra copies here I can open up.
I have the,
Everybody's got plans?
you have the same, you can open that new one if you want it, just. This is
Explain it on here, we can probably see it.
that's the old recorded plan.
Right. So yeah, so what you're looking at here is the previous recorded plan from somewhere in the 90s. No, that was actually 06.
That was sent in with all the plans, that's why I laid that out there.
Correct.
Okay.
I tried to provide a copy of any previous subdivision or land development plans of record, just to kind of get a history of the property. So right now we have this existing T-shaped building on the property with driveway access that comes in off of Crisscross Road. Apologies for those who don't know, my name is Rob Hand. I work for Burke Surveying and Engineering. We're working with H&T Design on this site for the proposed expansion. Currently, right now, Northeast Products, they don't own the property, but they lease this building from the current property owner. They operate a business that creates they manufacture docks. So like if you go on a boat dock or like a boat ramp or kayak launch, like if you go to a lake and you have a kayak launch, they manufacture all sorts of things like that, and they distribute them, around the nation. So what
Did you want this one up there? I'm sorry. Did you?
that's okay. Yeah, sure.
Sorry.
So this plan shows the proposed layout. Essentially, you have here's the same existing T-shaped building. We're gonna have a square building addition that's gonna be added on to the rear as it's from Crisscross Road. They're going to have a large gravel storage yard in the back here. Currently, right now, they're kind of storing things wherever they have room around the existing building. These docks are long and take up a lot of space, which is the primary drive for why they're adding onto this building, because for their production, the material has to come in, it comes in this side and then has to move around inside the building to the different areas where, different pieces get welded fast or machined or added on, and then it has to come out the other end. And adding on this building will provide them with additional space for moving material through the building. At this point, they're not proposing to add any additional employees or expand the business necessarily. It's mostly just providing extra space for them to do the same thing they're doing, just in a more efficient manner. The gravel storage yard back here would be for portions of their product, whether it be floats or the actual stainless steel or aluminum material, or the pipe material that they use, or the finished product while it's waiting to get shipped out. Essentially, right now, currently, it's served by public water that comes from Crisscross Road, and they have an existing on-lot septic system that's back in the area where the new addition is going to go. So part of this land development will include running a new sewer lateral across the Grande's property to the existing sewer that crosses to the east. That's pretty much it as far as the overview on what's happening here. Stormwater detention will be in the rear of the property. We have residential properties that join us in the actual borough line, follows the northern boundary of the property. So there's going to be some proposed screening fence and stuff along here. There'll be some vegetative screening along the rear of these two residential lots that abut the property or sort of lie between the majority of the property and Crisscross Road. The existing driveway access off of Crisscross Road will be improved, and the parking will actually be better laid out. The required parking spaces will be paved and striped, and they'll have macadam access around all access points of the building in the front and the side, again, to facilitate their operations and production inside the building.
I think to build off of this, and I don't think it impacts what they're doing too much, but just to explain the layout of the driveways, because it's kind of a very unique, when you look at it, there's a lot of lines to figure out what's going on, but there's a 25-foot portion of this flag lot that goes from Crisscross back to the existing property that's theirs. There's a easement to the north on what I think is lot 2, which is a water and access easement. So most of their driveway is in that easement. It's not really changing or anything, but just to call that out, that there's that existing easement that's between the two properties, and then the portion that's the 25-foot easement. The other part of it is there's actually another easement crossing through there for the water to reach this water and sewer, I guess.
Correct.
To reach lot 1 on this property. Just kind of a very unique layout when you look at it, and most of their driveway getting in there is existing on somebody else's property, but if you look at it, there's recorded easements for it. In my opinion, most of that lines up here. There were some comments that I had pertaining to some of the easements, but I don't think they truly impact the overall proposed improvements that they're doing here. But take you a few minutes when you look at it to figure out what's going on in there. So I just describe it. But
Yeah. I think, like you said earlier, there's a number of different pieces, regarding this project that put it's outside of the norm of a, regular, rectangular lot that has frontage directly on the road. It's a flag lot, so you have a stick that hangs out, and you have, like you said, another easement that supplements that to provide the area that's needed to put a commercial driveway from Crisscross Road back to the main body of the property.
And I think one of the other big factors for this property itself is the zoning hearing board decision. There was the zoning hearing 2020.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay. So December, I think, is when that decision was issued. there was a request for an expansion of the building itself as well as the overall lot coverage. And there was a lighting request as well. The lighting was approved, the other two were not. Basically, in quick terms, it basically said the building should be restricted to expansion of a non-conforming use, which is 50% by the zoning, and the total coverage was 35%, and they basically said that it shouldn't go beyond that. I will point out that the one big thing that comes into play here is that by zoning definition, stone is not considered a lot coverage. By stormwater terms, it has to be considered impervious. So when it comes down to it, and the short of the stormwater report, in my opinion, there's two waivers they're requesting, and we can talk about that, but the stormwater report, for all intents purposes here, I think it's basically been done pretty well in the spirit of the ordinance, if you want to say it that way. That I think a couple minor comments to get through, but I don't think, in my opinion, there weren't really many big comments in there. Like I said, two waivers, but
Modifications, we can't waive stormwater.
modifications is what it is. Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's all right. That's good to know. That's we phrased it as waivers, and
It's just, yeah, something that's been beaten into my head, so.
would it need to be do they grant a modification? Okay.
Yeah, I've heard it done both ways.
Yeah, and yeah.
Mm.
But just for the, yeah.
It depends who's sitting in your chair, how it gets phrased when it goes before the planning commission or the board.
That works for me. One of the, I guess as we're kind of jumping around here, just because it ties in. So the stormwater pond is at the end of the stone area. And yeah, I think
This area here, pretty much the whole rear of the property behind the gravel storage lot is the stormwater management basin there.
they manage the discharge, and again, for the most part, in accordance with the ordinance, but they have that discharging right next to the property line. One of our comments was consideration that, is there an easement needed for that? Just basically how close it is to the property line, to just make sure that there isn't any kind of improvements or anything that may be built to a detriment to their project on that property. And that the property owner would also allow for it.
See, yeah, an easement would be preferable, also an indemnification agreement to the township that should there be damage, Wharton Township's not responsible, the developer is.
And to that point, it's currently Grande, but the board is, I mean, they're pretty well along the way of looking at that property and taking it over as a park, an open space area. Grande was gonna get to school, if you don't know that background.
I remember that, but that never happened.
The school realized there really wasn't any agreements in place and has changed their mind over, it's been 10 years, I think, from when they're, at least, from when that whole thing went through, so.
Even better, if there's any damage to our property, they're responsible.
New people, I will say, that area does, and I would ask you to look at the land development plan for Grande, just specific to the stormwater in that area. I believe they actually accommodated a swale in that area for this property,
So this,
roughly.
so there's a swale that runs parallel with Rhino. And honestly, just the natural grading when they raised up the grades for Rhino. Right now, there's a stormwater pipe that goes underneath Rhino Drive there. We're essentially discharging to an existing stormwater collection area where all the runoff from here and here naturally flowed anyways. So essentially, we're not altering the drainage patterns, with the exception of that we're reducing the overall discharge and we're localizing it in the area where it's going anyways. So that's what we didn't necessarily have a concern regarding modification of the drainage patterns. It's not like everything's currently sheet flowing off of a 1,000-foot long wide line, everything's going to the same location anyways.
So in other words, the retention pond on this property would not be dumping into Grundy's retention pond.
Well,
Ultimately, that's where it would end up. But there, before it gets there, they are by the township requirements
that's-
reducing.
does Grande have one that takes runoff from the open space?
Yeah,
Okay.
big one.
I knew they had one in the back that everything from the building sites, the house sites comes around the back and then there's a basin over there, but I didn't know if this area drained over to that same stormwater
Yeah,
management.
they all come into that big one out front
Okay,
eventually.
eventually.
So that was one of the comments. The other is the sewer line. So they are showing that going that direction, connecting the existing sewer. Again, simply because the township's looking at taking over that property, what they're proposing is at the best location. And really, I think it's reasonable somewhere in there. I mean, I think it makes sense for them to be able to hook up to the sewer while they can, but that should really be reviewed by STECBEC and
It's not far from there, so.
yeah.
Who's gonna maintain the lateral if it runs across township property?
Will be a private lateral, an easement would be
Okay, so you
required
guys
for,
will maintain it, okay. Just making sure the township's not.
I mean, I'm assuming the township doesn't want to take it.
I just
so-
wanted to make sure that, yeah.
Right, so the assumption is that would be private. I guess, as we're talking about these things with the possibility of indemnifications and other such things, is that something we need to discuss with the township, or is that something that we're looking to you as a solicitor to provide feedback and opinion on? I mean, I know you're kind of posted as a question for consideration because now the township may be owning these properties where the stormwater is eventually draining to and where the sewer lateral is going to be crossing.
I think the board has to approve it and we would give them our recommendations and thoughts, but the board will ultimately have to approve that.
Agreements, and that would probably be through your office and just
Yeah.
sheer construction in that from STECBEC on that.
I got you. I'm just looking to make sure that the
I know
there's
what you're
no
asking.
stumbling blocks in the way here. So I mean, if there's somebody else we should be talking to now, because the only other option would be to run the sewer, still have a grinder pump, but run it up, through the strip and then down along Crisscross Road to the manhole, and it's a little messy to do things that way, which is why we kind of had it in the back. And we reached out to Grande, and they don't have any concerns, but again, they're,
So this topic did get brought up by, and I cannot remember.
Mike Fitzgerald.
There you go.
Sorry, that was in the back of my
Yeah,
head.
I can't remember the name. He was at one of the board meetings
okay.
when the open space was being discussed and brought up the desire to hook up to the sewer.
Okay.
And at the time, the board kind of said, well, talk to Grande, but it's probably in that limbo area where Grande's going to say, if they're going to take the property, talk to the township.
Well, that's
So,
yeah, that's kind of the short version of it, is that, if the township's taking it,
yeah, it's just, it's tough because they haven't accepted it yet. There's an agreement out there kind of being reviewed and looked at, so.
Right.
Between the two parties.
I guess, does anybody here have any idea when that might actually come to fruition?
I've been on the
According to
outskirts of
Grande,
that, so.
3 months ago, but.
They're working on the verbiage right now, hopefully within the next couple months, we'll
Yeah.
have the agreement signed.
Yeah, I think you're probably looking at a month or two
Okay.
for it to move forward as far as somebody signing it, so. Yeah, the question, I think, is just a matter of when should they approach the board for that portion of it. Because I think before they get any kind of approval, that should be.
Yeah, we should work that out rather than have to, then do an easement with Grande and then have to come back to us.
Well, right, and honestly, even if it's just a verbal discussion, like with the board to say, if you don't see any concerns with it and the solicitor doesn't see any concerns, again, provided that the proper language of agreements is put in place, and then just asking the supervisors if they can give some verbal feedback to say, yes, it will happen, or we don't have an objection to it. I'm just questioning if I should plan on,
I would say probably the best thing to do is reach out to STECBEC and have them, the general scope of tying in, where they should tie in, would probably be a good approach, and then the township can give feedback as far as the layout. Should it be adjusted a little bit for that?
Is Stecker the engineer for the authority? Or-
No, there are,
SEO.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, would they not be the
Well,
ones
they're
that had content? I thought LTU was.
LTL's the SEO, there are a sewer system engineer. So we don't really have an authority.
Yeah, I used authority quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
There's a couple.
LTL then?
No, LTL's the SEO would be, Back's the
So
sewer,
Steckback is the,
yeah, is a sewer engineer, I guess it's the easiest way to put it.
If you have an
Try to-
existing system, you probably gotta talk to LTL about abandoning that. and
Yeah.
Proper steps for that though.
oh, yeah, well, there'll be a whole bunch of on-site stuff with, whatever that needs to be done.
Right.
Demo permits and everything else, but I'm trying to remember, because we talked to both the borough and the township sewer authority back in 2020 when we were looking at this project originally, because at the same time we were looking at this one. For some reason, I don't remember talking to Steckback, but maybe we did.
Okay,
Yeah,
is anything proposed right now to go before the variance board?
Well, that was gonna be my question. What is the calculation of the expansion?
so, yeah, and that's, I can give you my 2 cents and it's a quick one. I looked at just the building, the existing pole building as it's labeled there, the T shape. And that number matched up with what was referenced in the zoning hearing board decision. That's why my calculation said it would exceed the 50%. If you go by that 50%, the addition would be like 6,500, and they're showing almost 8,500.
Right. When we originally brought this project in 2020, Gary Kraft was your engineer at the time, and we had reviewed all this with him at that time. And essentially, right now, they are occupying space in 2 buildings. They have this T-shaped building here and another building on the north end of the property. So the existing occupied space is the sum of these 2 buildings. And the expansion of the 50% was limited to an additional 50% of those 2 buildings. Because so essentially the building coverage is going to be expanded from existing to proposed by 50%.
So, yeah, that's the difference here, and that's, we can discuss that internally, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, the zoning officer isn't here to weigh in on it, so.
Yeah.
And with meeting dates getting shifting around, we just, we got the review letter today, so I think we'll have to circle back with Scott and Jeff to discuss that and get interpretation. If your zoning officer agrees with the interpretation that we had from back in 2020, then there should be no issues that we need to go to the zoning hearing board for, at least to that respect.
Yeah.
I know there was 1 or 2 other items from zoning that we can go over now as well.
There was, I had posed a question about there's a section in the zoning ordinance about projections into yards, and they list quite a few of them. One of the comments I had is about the paved area, and I was really looking at the rear of this lot too. I would not say that is, after we had a chance to look at that and discuss that, there's other discussion in the zoning ordinance that paving is permitted for parking areas and drive aisles. It's just you can't be within a certain, like 5 feet when a car's parked from the lot line, which implies that those areas are allowed. They've set all their parking beyond the setbacks just to make sure they're clear on that. But the drive aisles themselves, they're not specifically restricted by the ordinance. That was kind of a discussion to go through, and I'm all right with that one, but the dumpster is within the side yards, and that needs to be adjusted. It sounds like they'll be able to do that. That was one of them. The other comment was, the ordinance says all parking lots and access drives are to be paved. That's comment number 12 on page 2. They are proposing the main drive aisle in all the area that is paved with parking spaces. Everything beyond that is the stone area. I tend to believe that the proposed gravel area for storage and, I mean, it's access for part of the operation. I look at that as drive, because they're talking about access drives. Well, it's an access drive, maybe not to just the parking spots, but it's an access drive through the property. That's kind of how I look at it. I think it's something that we do need to look at very closely, especially because the coverage is right at where the maximum is permitted. But I think because we're gonna have to get a interpretation from the zoning officer anyway on this, that should be another one that we add to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, again, we're, as you said, the access driveways, all parking areas are paved, all areas that are required for access to the parking areas are paved. So we provide our minimum widths for access, for two-way access here. And then we just have, gravel on this side. We have gravel a lot down here, and then it's all connected through here. So we could consider this an access driveway, but essentially with the width that's here, they're going to be doing storage within there. So, it's really set up that this area here, that's your access driveway, stops here at the end of the new building addition. And then the rest of the gravel is just for outside storage of things. It's not for access to the building or access to those parking spaces. So, as Scott said, I think the zoning officer has to make a determination on that. But if you guys have any thoughts or feedback, it'd be welcome to hear what you have to say on that.
Is this, and I'm just looking at this now, but, okay, so this is the parking area here.
Yep.
And then the gravel areas extend up through there and out.
Correct. The gravel even extends all the way up through here. So like currently right now, this is all gravel surrounding the building. On this side and this side, again, we're trying to clean it up and put macadam around the building, macadam for all the parking spaces and the access driveways for them. And then just, expand the existing gravel down here to this lot and just sort of have clean lines for the layout around the building and the property.
Is that the purpose of the gravel on each side of on the side of the pavement? It's just for a clean line? I mean, is there any?
It's for storage. So again, this is,
Okay, so it's gonna be storage along the access drive, not just in the back?
it's going to be stored along this side and in the back, like anywhere that they have gravel, they're more than likely going to be storing things. So it becomes a question of anytime you have storage space, you need to get access to the stuff that's being stored. So what do you define as an access driveway versus what is gravel storage?
And what's being stored?
Floats, material, finished product or partially finished product.
Is there any hearing board that's a finished product? The decision, just so you're aware.
Yeah, I don't,
Not the decision, the permit that's before that.
The permit?
Yeah, there was zoning permit in 2019. Limits outside storage to finished product only.
Okay.
I think there might be a reference in the zoning decision as well.
That's what I was reading from, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And not to kind of shine a bad light on it, but I think through this zoning hearing board and the pushback they had, that was the impact to the neighbors. And I know obviously you can do whatever you are allowed within the zoning ordinance for the property, but it feels like the lines, if the coverage is right up to 3499 for lot coverage, and that parking seems to follow a line but extended by gravel just above it, that concerns me. And I also think that the zoning hearing board decision talked a lot about what can be stored and how much beyond what was approved either in 2020, which they said this is the use, or that permit which allowed the change in use to continue for light manufacturing. It spoke a lot to what the existing storage area was or the existing building. And again, it's allowed to be expanded to an extent for the building, but yeah, to me, it feels like the stone is expanded well beyond the paving area for some of the same use, but because they can't pave it.
Are those loading docks there too, the
No, those are parking spaces. So it's going to be at grade access. They don't have any loading docks here.
but they're backing a truck up somewhere to the building.
Yeah, they'll have overhead doors. They haven't finalized the location of the layout for the building where the exactly the location of the overhead doors would be. But this is the area in between those parking spaces is where they tentatively figure they should be, but they don't know the exact size or horizontal location along the wall of the building. So they would pull up in here and then either back in or just unload off the side of the truck or whatever they're doing, depending on how it comes in and how it's going out.
Right. And I think if you do have to go to zoning hearing board and or if it gets out from one of these meetings, that was a lot of discussion with the zoning hearing board, was the trucks turning, backing, so being prepared to that and where they're gonna park and idle and all those things that were discussed in the zoning hearing board.
And it did seem like, yes, they will have increased traffic, but the thought of bigger trucks or anything along those lines is not part of the intent, or do you know?
No, they're not. Again, they're not manufacturing anything larger by enlarging the building. It's just making the same things, just providing better space so they can do their same operations there.
And not to jump back in, one of the other things that had me bring up the question of paved area to the stone area and should it be paved beyond, there was a comment about the trucks accessing this area, I think almost for the bay doors, that they were going to be, or just to turn around in general, they would need to use some of the stone area.
Yeah, that's what I thought. They're gonna you need all this space up here.
I think they were talking about using the stone to turn around, which in that situation, the commercial business needs that for the trucks to maneuver. Yeah, and just another reason it was kind of interpreted on my end as drive aisle.
Because if they're gonna come out, yeah.
So I think that's definitely one of the bigger.
Okay, so that's something we want to get an explanation from the zoning officer.
Yep.
That's one thing. What's next?
I think one of the other things here, and I think the bigger ones we kind of hit them with those, but the one additional is number 14 on page 2. And I probably should have put this in bold, but I think you should look at it, is the landscaping. Technically, the adjacent R1 districts require a screening, and they would allow a fence or any type of a buffering. The part that I'm concerned with is the fact that it says the same screening must be 20 feet from the property boundary. So there's almost that 20-foot offset from I have to read the way it's written. The way it was written, it didn't say from the property line, but I think it said from the adjacent property, zone property. So yeah, it would be property line. So I think that 20-foot buffer from that property line where that screening is going to be could cause some issues with where some of the improvements are located.
And you're primarily looking at just the north line here along these residential uses and these two, but this is open space here, so that's not necessarily considered residential, correct?
And I think it's probably,
So you think they
I think
can't do it?
well, they may be able to look at this and find a way to make it work.
Yeah, so comment number 14 says all sides are required for screening.
I didn't even think about the open space, but I guess technically it's an R1 district.
Yeah, I was gonna say, is, without having the language in front of me, is it by zoning district or zoning, what's located on the on the property.
Sorry. Hopefully I still have it open to where I. Give me a second.
And that might be another zoning officer interpretation.
Jeff's gonna be busy when he gets
That's what you get for taking time off.
back. Right. You should have known.
What was that?
On vacation, he told me he's working.
Is he working? Who said that?
He's like, he's not on a vacation, so.
What is it, 5:07? Sorry, everybody. 5:07, 5. Parking area for non-residential uses, which are designed to contain more than 4 vehicles, shall be screened from the view of persons on any land zone, R1, which is adjacent to the land on which the non-residential parking area is located and shall be located a minimum of 20 feet from any land so zoned.
So it's zoned R1, not, it's based on the zoning district, not the use.
Well, that says parking area is not ground storage.
Parking areas for non-residential uses which are designed to contain more than shall be screened. So he's correct, that is, it has to do with the parking areas. So that really should be these properties.
This is 20 foot there.
Now, the question is here, this is Fleetwood. You have different zoning. Does that meet the intent of residential for the screening, or is that just?
I think even though that's not what the ordinance says, I think if there are residences there, I think that would be a good neighbor.
That's what I was looking at it. I think to that point then, as far as the other areas that aren't parking.
The other thing too is if that's where and I can't see the side, but if that's where the trucks are turning, that's to keep the lights, so.
Sorry, what was the lights?
If a truck's pulling out of there, that screening's gonna.
Well, we're not- There's screening that's being provided, and the question is whether or not we need a 20-foot buffer between the edge of the gravel storage line and the north property line.
Okay.
Yes, I think
The
that's.
screening is being provided, so the visual block to, again, like you said, to mitigate any lighting, or it's gonna reduce noise and, well, just vision of the operations on this property from the adjoining residences.
First glance, the two lots at the front, I think they can make something work there. I don't know if you're gonna get it along the 25-foot flag lot portion of this going in there. There isn't any currently, and they're not doing too many improvements to what the existing operation is there.
And there's no parking in that.
Not parking either, really. Yeah, good point.
Just
Just the other side is really the question.
Another question for Jeff.
So.
Okay, let's sum it up here. Somebody's gonna talk to Fleetwood about the layback or.
Yeah, I think they're all residential properties right there.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all residential district that I think it should apply, as Michelle was saying. It's meant for a screening between residential zoned and parking.
Right.
So I think that really, we can let Jeff interpret it, but I
Well,
think that's really gonna be.
I guess that's my question is, are we viewing the gravel storage lot the same as it would be parking? Because if they're not parking their vehicles there, it's not a parking facility. It's adjacent to a parking facility.
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say only because you do have parking that's required up in that area.
I mean, more than likely what you're gonna see is material piled that, like, or like finished product or whatever they're gonna have is gonna be stacked up there. So that is gonna provide that additional physical barrier.
Yeah, but
And
you
behind
can't,
that's gonna be a fence.
it's not permanent.
No, it's not.
I don't think it meets the screening requirements for
But
the
we're not-
ordinance
but
either.
there's gonna be a fence that's gonna meet the screening requirements.
Oh, you're saying as far as the buffer, the 20 feet?
Yeah, this is,
I
the only thing that affects the plan is the 20 feet because the screening requirements are already met.
You're getting, yeah.
Right. So we're providing a physical barrier for our site, sound, whatever. It's just a question of how far back the edge of the gravel needs to be from the northern property line.
So let me ask this question, should he request further decision by the zoning officer for specific portions of this, or should I just have that occur? And if he should have it in writing, he could probably lead into his interpretation, what's being asked.
I think it'd be a combination that you can forward Jeff Scott's letter and he can hear if you need to provide the interpretations. What's your position as a zoning officer?
Yeah, okay. All right. We're getting into that summary part. I think we asked for a little more information on the lighting at the top of the third page. Again, I think that's really just to speak to more detail to clarify that it's meeting the ordinance.
So I'm gathering we can accomplish everything without going back to the variance.
I think
Yeah, we need,
they need to talk to the zoning officer to get an official position on
They
some
do.
of these, yep.
Okay.
Yep. And once they get that decision, then
To make the decision.
maybe they have to. If not, then they'll be back with revisions to address the letter and go from there. But as far as Saldo, the big comment, there's a request for the scale on the property. I have no objections. It's just easier to read with what they have. But they're also asking for a preliminary final. I think we need to,
If we can do that.
and that's the request. The ordinance allows for a sketch plan to go to final. If it's a smaller plan, the process is preliminary and then final. If there's a request for preliminary/final, that's one of their requests. So the waivers are the scale, preliminary, final submission, and then there's two for stormwater. And just to touch on those real quick, the waivers they're requesting, the ordinance we have in place is a little more stringent than standard DEP requirements for NPDES permits. So when our ordinance says you gotta be 3 feet from whatever the limiting zone, whether it's rock or limestone or something, most of the DEP requirements are 24.
Well, yeah, it's just 24.
24. So they're asking for that waiver, but to still meet that 24-inch separation. And the other one is, ours says have the pond be watered in 24 hours. DEP says, well, you got to retain 72 hours maximum is what they allow for. So they're in between there. So that's why they're asking for that waiver.
and then Scott and I talked this afternoon about should you request a waiver for sidewalks and curbs?
Modification. I'm sorry, stormwater modification.
I wasn't gonna say anything. I
I got to train myself now.
If you need it, and our discussion was that you should probably request it and just put it on the plan just for future. Why isn't there sidewalk here? Why isn't, it's documented that they granted the waiver.
And just to clarify, there's sidewalk that ends right near Rhino on the north side. Actually, I might keep going. But on the side of their property, it's just a few more properties down. If they put it in, they're 25-foot section, it's gonna probably be 2 panels. And that's about it, one on each side, really. And it goes nowhere, so even PennDOT kind of discourages doing stuff like that, so.
Unless it's an 88, right?
Yeah. So, just looking at it real quick. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I don't know if you have any others you want to hit.
Well, I mean, you guys want to talk about your thoughts on the waivers that are being requested? I mean, there's one or two other items. I think since I got you and Michelle here, I'll probably ask a question or two. But do you guys have any thoughts? Do you definitely want to see this come through as preliminary and then a final plan? I mean, again, we're gonna still dot all our i's and cross all our t's and, the initial review on the stormwater, which is the large
In other words,
comprehensive.
if we go give the approval for preliminary, he has to come back for the final. We won't grant that.
Yeah. That would
Do we want to do the waivers this evening? Do we skip them till we get to the?
I would say, they're gonna have to be coming back. He's just looking for a feel from the planning commission on preliminary, final, and then the stormwater.
So we're not really doing a whole lot until.
No,
No, well, for me, you are, because I mean, your feedback will provide us guidance as.
Hopefully you understand each other.
Well, right. But I mean, you guys as a board have to let me know if the relief that we're requesting is in agreement with what you'd like to see for this
Do
project.
you guys have any questions or concerns?
No, I mean, my only concerns are the many zoning issues, right? And if those are gonna be taken care of, I wouldn't be opposed to skipping to the waivers. On the stormwater, like, why are we not meeting our requirements instead of, so it asks for an explanation of the hardship, right? Like,
So the simple explanation is this, that limiting zones are determined, they're site specific, they're soil specific. We had to have a contractor go out with a backhoe, dig a deep pit, go in trained in reading soils. He looks at the characteristics and he says, this is where the limiting zone is, where you might have slowed permeability. Basically, it's like if you're ever involved in septic system, you have what they call modeling. Essentially, the water slows down, or you have bedrock, which can be another limiting factor.
Right.
And then the ordinance is the intent of the ordinance says that you're going to provide a vertical separation between that, so the bottom of your infiltration facility is going to have whatever 2 feet or 3 feet before it gets to this limiting zone to sort of percolate down through the soil profile before it starts moving laterally. DEP allows for 2 feet. It's a statewide thing. It's understood everywhere. The township is a bit more strict. The problem with, it's not a bad thing to have an increased requirement for vertical separation, but the problem being is that if you have a site that won't allow for that, then you just can't provide infiltration. And then you provide a design that mitigates the peak flows, but doesn't mitigate the volume that's required for runoff. So that's why we ask for the relief. As long as we're still complying with the state standards, we're providing a design that's going to provide groundwater recharge on the site. It's just not going to meet that extra 12 inches of vertical separation between the limiting zone and the bottom of the infiltration facility.
yeah. Is there a specific reason in this case that you can't meet the 36 inches?
The soils, the characteristics of the soils that are on the site.
Okay.
So when the testing, like I said, when they dug the pits, we dug several pits across where the pond stormwater basin location is, and the results of that indicated that, this is where the tests were and this is where the existing grades are. So we're kind of limited by what's available with the ground and the soils that are there.
And so is that related to why you want more than 24 hours of holding as well?
Correct. Because again, in addition to just reading the soil profiles, they'll do what's called a double ring test. They'll hammer 2 steel rings. Well, sometimes they use plastics. I don't know what these guys specifically did, but they'll, concentric rings in, and then they pour water in and time how long it takes for it to drain out. Again, similar to a septic perk test, but it's a little more specific because the rings help to localize the measurement for vertical movement through the soil as opposed to movement through the side of an excavation.
Now, I'm just curious, is it something that you can actually, that you can change the characteristic of a soil or not?
Only if you remove the soil and put different soil in.
Okay, kind of like soil amendments or something like that from
So-
over the solar farm, right?
But usually the soil amendments only reflect what you're doing on the surface. The testing is your subsoil. So essentially, even if you were to remove the soils that you have there, even if you didn't have better soils beneath it, you'd still be restricted by whatever's beneath those soils that you replace anyways.
So what would the reason be for having the 36-inch versus the 24 in that ordinance?
I'm guessing that was just one of the, and I can't remember when that was last updated. That was probably a standard depth at that time. And over time, as development kind of limits all the, well, it starts going from all the good, best properties to
So
what
our
are developing now.
ordinance is
and
just
worse.
older than the update.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely on that end of it. And to that 24-hour release, and the questions you're asking are good ones. I've already gone through the stormwater, so some of this I'm kind of taking for granted and saying, no, it's a good reason for a waiver, but you're asking the good questions. Even the release rates that they have to meet those release rates, but still have everything released in 24 hours is kind of a balancing game as well. Just another factor that plays into it. So you kind of get limited there, where if it was just straight NPDS and we didn't apply the ordinance, they would still be able to meet those. And to be honest, usually our rates of reductions are a little more stringent than what the NPDS permits are. In most cases. I don't know about this one specifically, if it was or not, but.
And this is something I've routinely seen modifications of, requests for, because of exactly it's the date of the ordinance, they just haven't caught up with.
So I'm gathering if he comes back and we're all on the same page, the things we talked about this evening get accomplished, we can go from preliminary to final.
I guess that's the question, if you would rather see it go through preliminary process and then final, or if you're okay with the preliminary final process in one.
Speak up, people.
And do you want the zoning officer's determination before you make that?
I would rather see the zoning issues addressed, but once those would be addressed, I'd be fine.
You're saying preliminary to final.
Right.
Okay, that's specific.
Okay.
Is there any thought on the size plan? Maybe we could do that, handle that later.
Oh, the scale? Yeah, it says it should be a 1 inch equals, I think that's just another thing that could be updated and not an issue. If they said 1 inch equals 50 or greater, I always say it wrong. That just allows their 1 inch equals 30. It fits on one sheet, you can read it fine. The scale is pretty,
Yeah. If it was 1 inch equals 50, you would have trouble reading everything. So the property's too big to fit all on one plan, and 1 inch equals 20. But I mean, again, I don't necessarily need action on those waivers. We have the other waivers that we're still gonna have to discuss when we come back with the next plan submission, but if you guys wanna act on the.
Okay, I'm gathering that if they come back with preliminary to final plans and all our actions talked tonight are accomplished, we can deal with it. Do I have a motion for that?
You don't need a motion.
Yeah, we don't get much guidance, right?
just giving them guidance.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it, fine.
Okay, and then I guess just a couple few housekeeping. So comment on page 3, number 4A was to codify property owner must execute the owner certification with the cover sheet. If Northeast Products becomes the equitable owner,
I think
their
equitable owner is fine, isn't it?
equitable owner is fine to sign.
No?
It depends when everything's transferring over, because we get into the issues with the agreements and who's gonna be responsible for any agreements if somebody defaults. So we'll just have to, I can be somewhat flexible on that, just depending when everything's gonna take over.
Yeah, I'm not sure why I even spoke up. I would have deferred to her really. I said that, so I got what I'm thinking.
Well, I guess, because it's been done like that before, so it's just a question of, I guess, is there a threshold that I can take back to my clients to say, look, if you're planning on, because I know they're obviously not going to make this kind of investment and improvement of the property without going for ownership of it, because it's not the property owner that's paying for the improvements, it's the tenant. So
Would you want to release would you want the plans signed and released for recording before they have ownership?
would I want that?
Would they want that?
I was gonna say that I'm not entirely sure what that's why I'm just trying to see.
I mean, that would be a perfect world, because
Well, in a perfect world, then they would be the record owner, yes.
Yeah.
But I think, there, many times I see that any agreement of sale is contingent upon land development plan approval. And in such cases, we could give you an agreement of sale.
If they have an agreement of sale that's gonna close within so many days of land development approval, like, I'm willing to work with that.
Okay.
I just, it's things that they can come up in the air and
No, I got you.
so.
The site plan to be reviewed by fire and emergency services, is that something that the township does, or is that something that I need to reach out
That's a
to?
good question.
What's that, sir?
Is there somebody that should see the plans on behalf of fire, emergency?
When it becomes final plan and they are stamped, I send the plans to both fire companies, so they are aware of the development.
They don't see it during the review phase.
No,
I would much rather than see it now, rather than have to make any changes based on the feedback that they have.
what's that?
They won't make any change.
I think we've had the
What
struggle
fire
trying
department
to
is this? It's Fleetwood, I guess, right?
Yeah.
Virginville and Walnut Town.
That would be one of the towns.
Okay. Oh, Wallington, yeah, right. I mean, I know,
Yeah, I always send the plans to them once they're actually recorded. I had good copies of everything, and I usually send them out to the fire companies and
Right.
EMS, et cetera.
And so there's no township fire marshal
Right.
to do those inspections, right?
yeah, again, each municipality handles things a little differently. A lot of times, they'll ask that if, I don't foresee anything here because this site, the layout is open. There's lots of space for the vehicles to get around the building and stuff.
Right.
So, but many other times, you never know what a fire chief might ask for. So,
Like in Kutztown, they'll
yeah,
run you through it.
Bob Howell, he'll give you a 3-page letter.
Right.
So,
Okay, we all satisfied.
I'm gonna throw one more in, if you don't
Right.
mind. And I was
I
just,
see you looking at numbers, okay?
yeah, I'm just wondering, I'm looking at the existing building and then that outbuilding, and I'm still not getting the number that you had as the proposed. If you take the 13,479 and then the 1165, you get the 1464, and half of that's 732.
But you're also dropping the outbuilding, correct?
right, you're dropping the outbuilding.
So you're not actually adding all of that.
So you're not actually, because this is going away.
Okay.
So then you add this back into that, and that's this.
Or subtract it from the 85.
Well,
More accurate.
Yeah.
Smarter math.
I'm missing it altogether. I thought you were saying the existing operation is the two buildings.
The existing operation is the 2 buildings.
Okay.
Okay, so, but if you take this away, so you're taking this, so this plus this equals what's existing.
So
You now have 50% of that is what you can add onto the site, assuming both buildings that are there remain. Correct?
Okay.
So if you eliminate that building, that gives you an extra
Right, so the addition.
1165. So if you add 1165 to the number you have there,
The outbuilding.
that's how you get that.
I mean, it makes
The
sense. I don't
addition is
know if it's
subtracting the
kosher, but
outbuilding.
it makes sense.
To wrap your mind around it takes a minute.
And I think the issue that Jeff has to think about is, you still get credit if you're tearing down that building.
Well, you should, if you were taking
I
that.
agree, but I just think that's something we need to make sure Jeff
Right.
considers when he looks at this.
Again, I think it's all the more reason to request
No,
the decision
yes.
for that so that he hears that side of it, whether
I can make a
Plays
color,
into his
I can make a
decision.
color diagram, show everything.
I mean, he's probably just as familiar as you are on this property, so.
He was involved back in 2020, so.
Okay,
I'm done.
any more?
Nope, not on my end.
Not, and you have no questions? Okay. Any miscellaneous business? I think we already had it.
We used up the time.
Public participation, we don't have. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Just to clarify, just because Next meeting, okay, there's only 4 Mondays in June, so this is 24. Okay, just so we're all on the same page, thank you.
You got it? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, who moved? Okay, Mac moved. Sam seconded. Any discussion or question? All in favor, say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
So you've got homework.
Always.
Yeah.
Turn the recording off if you don't mind signing out for me, please.
The guy at Stack Tech is Scott Wrights.
Okay.
I'm glad you remember because I'm sitting on.
He seems to be the point of contact for everything.